Heading towards this weekend season opener, the Seahawks have added a new quarterback to the room. We'll be breaking it all down here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're tuning in nearby Snohomish, Washington, or over in Cherubusco, Indiana, we appreciate each and every one of you. We are officially at our first game week here in the 2024 season. Seahawks taking on the Denver Broncos, and found out today they're going to be wearing their royal blue throwbacks, the 1990s throwbacks for the season opener when Denver comes to town on Sunday. We're going to take a first look at those Denver Broncos, and we're going to revisit the schedule and maybe switch up some things with what we expect from the Seahawks team in 2024. This episode brought your way by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedInNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedInNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. Prize Picks, run your game. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. After Seattle announced its initial 53-man roster last week, and then a flurry of signings came in on the practice squad, one glaring thing stood out, and we talked about this a few times last week, Rob. There wasn't a third quarterback on the practice squad or the active roster. PJ Walker was with the team during training camp in the preseason, but it appears that the Seahawks decided they wanted to go a different direction. And to be honest, PJ Walker struggled quite a bit during the preseason, so it's not surprising Seattle has decided to go a different direction with a much younger quarterback in Jaren Hall, formerly of BYU. If our friend Nick Lee was on the show, we know that he would be gushing about Jaren Hall joining the Seahawks, but third quarterback coming in. He's 26, so not exactly the youngest second-year quarterback you're going to find, but had a really good preseason for the Minnesota Vikings and offers some traits that could make him an intriguing developmental player behind Geno Smith and Sam Howell.
Yeah, and Corbin, you just said one of the very key words there when we're talking about with Jaren Hall is developmental player. And, Jaren Hall was drafted in the 5th round just a year ago by the Minnesota Vikings. He was released when that squad decided to go in a different direction, specifically signing Brett Rippon, former Seahawk, former Boise State Bronco, of course, to their roster to replace Jaren Hall. I think that from the Minnesota Vikings perspective, I think it's easy to understand if you just invested a 5th round pick in this young man a couple of years ago, then what's changed? And I can tell you what's changed is the Minnesota Vikings, of course, used their 1st round selection this past year on J.J. McCarthy. It's a very similar situation in my mind, Corbin, to what we saw the Seahawks take advantage of with Sam Howell. Of course, Sam Howell had been drafted by Washington, and then they decided to go in a different direction. Their 1st round pick being, of course, Jaden Daniels. And I think it just doesn't make a lot of sense to have multiple young, talented quarterbacks that you're trying to develop. That's just not the way that the snap counts and practice actually work out. And the Seahawks, of course, have essentially a coach on the field with their starting quarterback in Geno Smith. They've got a young quarterback that they're developing already, of course, in Sam Howell. Really, what comes down to it is just the philosophy that an organization has is that third quarterback. Some teams want another set of eyes, a future coach. And that's what I believe the Minnesota Vikings are looking to do with Brett Rippon, as I mentioned before. Just because I think that's what makes him special is because he doesn't have a great arm. He doesn't have elite athletic ability. Jaren Hall is better arm, better athletic ability. But one of the things that Rippon has in spades, essentially, is that he is almost like a coach on the field for the squad. So I do do think that that's helpful for the Minnesota Vikings. And for the Seahawks, they view Jaren Hall as basically a low floor, high floor, and also has a high ceiling to him. It's basically you are getting a quarterback that still has some upside to him. He can make every throw in the book. That you mentioned that the impressive preseason that he had 4 touchdowns, not a single interception, had significant playing time, 2 scores against both the Green Bay Packers. The 2 touchdowns were against the Cleveland Browns and the Philadelphia Eagles. The 4 touchdowns were on a variety of throws. One was a beautiful play action boot where Jaren Hall had to show incredible accuracy and touch to complete the ball in the first place. Not only complete it, wound up going for a 71-yard touchdown. He showed great precision on a quick slant and crossing route. There are a lot of tricks. By the way, 6'2", 205 pounds, runs a 4.6. So all of the dual threat capabilities I previously talked about, I think that the Seahawks are going to prioritize in a quarterback that could also serve as the scout team quarterback for your starting defense. So, Corbin, again, I think that this is another masterstroke by John Schneider. I think that he is getting a quarterback who has starting caliber talent. Hell, he started a couple of games last year as a rookie for the Vikings, and they got him on the cheap. So I think that this is a savvy signing by the club, and I expect him to remain on the practice squad for the long-term future of this team.
We broke down a number of possible practice squad quarterbacks last week. There was some discussion about Desmond Ridder potentially being a player that the Seahawks could bring in, but Jaren Hall was a name that the more that I looked at the preseason tape and went back and watched some of the film, and yeah, you can call us sickos. We watch preseason games on replay because that's what we do. But watching some of the throws he was making compared to last year, you could just see how much more confidence that Jaren Hall was playing with compared to a year ago. And he averaged 7.5 yards per attempt. So it's not like he was dinking and dunking the ball. Mm-hmm. He was throwing the ball on intermediate and deep routes at a pretty proficient level, albeit against third, fourth string defenses, but still you saw tangible improvements across the board. And as you mentioned, he's got the 4.6 speed, 6'2", a little over 200 pounds. He's got the measurables that you're looking for. And I think when you're trying to find a practice squad quarterback, yes, having a guy like PJ Walker, who has started a lot of games in the NFL, that has value. But there also comes a point where you need to have some players that are going to have more upside. And when you're running a scout team offense, PJ Walker can move a little bit, but the throwing stuff, we saw it in training camp, we saw it in the preseason. He really struggled from an accuracy perspective. He's barely above 54% for his career completion percentage. So Seattle needed to bring somebody in that not only was younger, that had more of an upside. I don't know that you're going to squeeze much more out of PJ Walker at this stage of his career. He's almost 30 years old. Jaren Hall, though, year 2, has more physical tools. He's got a bigger arm. He is arguably a more athletic overall player, at least at this stage. You're bringing in a guy that can develop still, that has a potentially high ceiling, that can compete against players like Sam Howell, and also is going to give you really good looks with the scout team offense because of his mobility, the arm strength that he brings to the table that PJ Walker would not. So the more that I watched the preseason tape, this is a guy that I was really excited about potentially coming out of Seattle, and add in the fact that I've been told by a couple of people that have links to this football team that the Seahawks were pretty high on Jaren Hall as a day 3 possibility 2 years ago. So this is a player that they have had a high evaluation on really since the pre-draft process when he was coming out of BYU. Makes it all make sense here that this is a guy that they decided to turn to instead of bringing back PJ Walker, which, yes, that would have been a safer signing. But if you're looking for a guy that can develop and also give you really good looks on the scout team, then Jaren Hall is absolutely the guy to get it done.
He absolutely does. And I would agree with you. Based on the sources I have, I was led to believe that the Seahawks were quite high on Jaren Hall a couple of years ago as well. And it's easy to understand why. He took over for Zach Wilson, former number 2 overall selection, of course, by the New York Jets. Interestingly enough, now, as we're going to be talking about a little bit later, is actually serving as the 3rd string quarterback with those Denver Broncos. But the point is, Zach Wilson was an absolute superstar at BYU, and Jaren Hall took over for Zach Wilson, and he showed the poise to be able to take over for the man. on that campus. And the fact that he showed that poise as a young man, I think it speaks to who he is as a quarterback and as a leader. And leadership is so important at the quarterback position, especially if you're going to be that kind of third string guy who's not going to get as many reps. So again, I think that this makes an awful lot of sense. And we talked about the athletic ability for a moment. I want to kind of talk about that just for a second. Again, 4.62 in the 40-yard dash. That's pretty damn fast for a quarterback. And it's the change of direction. His short shuttle and 3-cone times, Corbin, were right up there with some of the wide receivers and cornerbacks. This guy is shifty. And again, I think that when you look at a defense that is programmed the way that Mike McDonald's is, where it's going to be about physicality, it's going to be about staying in your lane, it's going to be about trust and multiplicity, then the easiest way for that to break down is when the quarterback is a real scrambling weapon. And so again, I think that it's critical that the Seahawks found a quarterback who can run around, can do some things, can extend the play, a la Russell Wilson, a la Kyler Murray. Those types of quarterbacks can be kind of the kryptonite against the Mike McDonald defense. So this way you're giving your defense a real look. Look, PJ Walker's a good player, as we talked about, but he had his opportunity and the accuracy just wasn't good enough. Yep. Jaren Hall in year 2 has shown such impressive improvement in terms of the accuracy that, again, I thought that this was the roll of the dice worth taking.
When we come back, we are going to shift focus to the 2024 regular season. The Seahawks will be opening against the Broncos on Sunday at Lumen Field. How many games do we think the Seahawks are going to win now that we've had a chance to see them in training camp in the preseason? We're going to be revisiting the schedule and maybe making some adjustments. Who knows what kind of adjustments, but making adjustments to our wins-loss projections for the Seahawks. We'll get to those coming up next year on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Locked On Seahawks is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you'd do if you had an extra hour in your day? For me, I wish I had a little bit more time to create heavy metal and hard rock music. The best way to squeeze the special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you could do more of it. And BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. This episode is also brought your way by Game Time. You shouldn't have to think about skipping a mortgage payment when you want to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Want to see the Seahawks against the Broncos in their home opener on Sunday at Lumen Field? You can get seats at one of the loudest venues in the NFL in the lower bowl for under $150. Great seats without breaking the budget to see some exciting young talent as the Seahawks look to get off to a fast start. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event, and a Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined here on today's show by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s that are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The regular season officially upon us as we enter week 1. The Seahawks against the Broncos coming up on Sunday at Lumen Field. We will get to the Broncos later in the show, specifically as we start to dive into this week 1 matchup. But, Rob, you may remember back in May when the schedule came out, of course, we had to come up with our record projections and how the Seahawks were going to finish, even though we had not seen the team on the field even for OTAs at that point. But, of course, everybody's got to have their predictions. Here we are now. We've gotten to see training camp. We got to watch the preseason. We've got a better idea of what this Seahawks team is going to look like. Now, we don't have a perfect idea. We haven't gotten to see regular season action yet, but we at least are more informed what this team could be this season. And we have a better idea, at least in your case. You've been in a bunch of training camps. You've got a better idea what some of these other teams may look like the Seahawks are going to be playing this year as well. And that makes it a little bit better. It's a better litmus test in terms of trying to figure out how the Seahawks are going to fare against the rest of their competition.
Yeah, it's just perspective. Have some perspective of actually being there in person for a couple of training camps that are opponents of the Seahawks in 2024. But also, of course, just getting an opportunity to watch the tape, seeing some rookies that are splashing in preseason, some veterans that look like they have been rejuvenated. A year ago, I was very, very bullish on Matthew Stafford coming back and having a strong season, and wasn't surprised that the Rams bounced back a little bit, much to the chagrin, of course, of the Seahawks and Seahawks fans out there. So as you said, Corbin, when the schedule first came out, I think that you and I and just about everybody else kind of looked at their favorite NFL clubs and, looked at the schedule and tried to predict what they thought that might happen. I was thinking kind of 9-8-ish for this squad, very similar to what we saw a year ago, right on the cusp of playoff contention, but certainly not a team that I thought was going to be making a deep playoff push. But virtually every single thing that I've seen as far as the Seahawks, Corbin, leads me to be much more optimistic about their chances. And on the flip side, some of Seattle's opponents that I've had an opportunity to evaluate a little bit, I've been less than impressed by, key players at key positions, especially at the quarterback position. I mentioned Matthew Stafford a moment ago. I wasn't quite as impressed when I saw him this year. The fact that the Seahawks are going to start off this season going up against the rookie we know in Bo Nix in week 1 against the Denver Broncos, and then traveling in week 2 to Foxborough, where, right now it looks like it's going to be Jacoby Brissett as the starter for the New England Patriots, but there is going to be some pressure internally and externally for the Patriots to move on to Drake May. So there's a chance the Seahawks are going to start off the season 2-0, and that's where things really get interesting because, of course, then they're going to be hosting the Miami Dolphins and then have the Detroit Lions, which has made for some fascinating games the last couple of years. I think you can see a scenario where the Seahawks start off a healthy 3-1, perhaps even 4-0, but they also could drop those next two and wound up basically limping into October at 2-2. And that's what I actually think is a strong possibility, is the Seahawks are going to be kind of flirting with that 500 mark. But as I said before, I am encouraged by what I've seen by Seattle, specifically Geno Smith, specifically the depth of Seattle's offensive line. And I've been very encouraged by what I've seen about the cornerback play, both depth and the top line talent as well. So I actually have the Seahawks at this point, Corbin, I think they're going to go somewhere. To me, there's like a 3-game kind of fluctuation here, assuming the key players remain healthy. I think you can make an argument this club winds up 8-9. I'm going to make an argument it's going to be closer to 11-6. And I do believe that Geno Smith is as good as any of the quarterbacks that are on their schedule this year. You're talking about guys like Aaron Rodgers of the Jets and Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills, as well as the quarterbacks I mentioned before. But I don't see any of those quarterbacks, at least in my opinion, who are appreciably better than the Seahawks and Geno Smith. And I hate to oversimplify things, but that really is what it comes down to a lot of the time in the NFL. It's just who's got the better quarterback. So I think that there's a strong chance the Seahawks wind up being 11-6. I think that they can get past the divisional round, make a healthy push into the playoffs. And once you get into the dance, as you well know, sir, anything can happen.
Yeah, I went back and I listened to our show back in May, and you and I were kind of in a similar tangent. I had 10-7 for the Seahawks as the record. I thought that this was a team that was going to be able to get to that double-digit win mark, and I'm still bullish on that idea. In fact, the 11-6 record, I was considering that, but I'm still going to stay 10-7 just because I look at some of the out of division opponents. They're going to have to play the NFC North, which is a much improved division. You got to play the AFC East that's got 3 really good teams in it. So I look at the fact that the Seahawks have those tough games. The entire NFC West is going to be impacted by this too. This isn't just a Seahawks issue. So 10 wins could win this division when it's all said and done. But I think a healthy 10-7 record getting into the postseason, right now, I'm still going to say it's a wild card. I still think San Francisco, though, that window is going to be slamming shut soon. I think they've got a lot of issues they're dealing with. Even though they got Ayuk re-signed, Trent Williams might hold out and start the season. So they've got some big fish that they're trying to fry there, and they've got some other contracts, Brock Purdy, that are going to need to be made here in the next year or so that are going to put a lot of stress on their finances, they're going to have to lose some players. But I think San Francisco is the top dog still in this division. That being said, I am more bullish on the Seahawks being able to compete with San Francisco now than what I was a month ago. I like the physicality that Mike McDonald has really imparted on his entire team during this process. I like the change in mindset. It just seems like it's a more disciplined football team. Really like some of the rookies they've got. I think Byron Murphy II is going to be an impact player. I think Christian Haynes is going to play at some point early. They got a couple other rookies, Tyrese Knight, that have impressed. And there's some newcomers that they've brought in that I think have been really nice additions for this football team as well. Even guys like Laviska Shenault, who are playing more niche roles, those guys are going to help this football team with those unique skill sets that they have. So I'm still looking at this as a team that gets 10-7. I'm not changing my record, but to me, it's a more optimistic 10-7 in the sense that feels like this team is trending in the right direction. And that 10-7 could be a very dangerous team to play in the postseason rather than one that, oh, you're lucky you're here this year, and then maybe next year you can take that step. I think this is a team that has a chance to be really good, health permitting. That is always the case with all these teams. But to me, the one part of the schedule that still stands out, after they play the Giants on October 6th, you've got the 49ers at home just 4 days after this, a Thursday night game. And then you've got a road trip to Atlanta. I think the Falcons are going to be tough. And then you've got Buffalo and the Rams. And then another game after the bye week against the 49ers. To me, that is the make or break stretch here. If Seattle can get to 3-2, I would even say 2-3 in that stretch. Maybe you're okay. But that stretch to me is the toughest part of their schedule that they have based on where they're going to be playing these games and having the short rest for the first 49ers game. To me, that is the one section of this schedule that really jumps out. There's some harder sections in there as well, but that to me is the one that really stands out that could make or break Seattle's season.
Yeah, I agree. As you said, I mean, that stretch there, basically week 5, you got the Giants, and then week 6 is the 49ers on Thursday Night Football. We remember just how physical those games are. That's going to be, it's probably an instant classic. It seems like every time the 49ers and the Seahawks win, Seattle can kind of not turn the ball over. They can make those, incredible games. And then at the Falcons, I agree with you. I think that the Falcons are kind of a sneaky team here. Of course, with the change of quarterback, that just automatically is going to make their offense better. But I think the defense, Raheem Morris is the new head coach there, is going to make that a much sounder defense. And that's kind of been a bugaboo for the Atlanta Falcons for a while. I think you're going to see Bijan Robinson take a next step in his career. So I think the Falcons are going to be a fascinating one. Then you mentioned a team that to me is one of the real wild cards, not only against the Seahawks, but across the entire NFL, and that being the Buffalo Bills. I mean, there is not many players who I think can put on that Superman cape and help their team eke out victories the way that Josh Allen can. And so I'm fascinated to see how he is able to perform there. And again, in that little stretch there, you have the divisional opponents in the 49ers, and then wrapping up there with the Rams. Clearly, the Seahawks have to be better in their own division to be talking about anything about playoffs, certainly not a division title. So I would agree with you. I think that the gap between San Francisco and Seattle has lessened. I think it's going to be fascinating to see if the gap between the LA Rams, who of course have thumped Seattle, consistently now against a team that I think that Seattle has been more talented than the LA Rams the last couple of years. And so that to me is where this is, that 3-game kind of window where the Seahawks have to eke out some victories in there. Otherwise, we're talking about the same kind of thing this year as we saw last year.
The Seahawks will be looking to get off to a fast start so they can get to that 10-plus win mark. And in order to do that, you got to beat the Denver Broncos first at Lumen Field. We're going to be taking our first look at Seattle's week 1 opponent, a much different looking Denver Broncos team. We'll take a close look at what's new, some of the draft picks, and much more. That'll be coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. For week 1, I'm going to be projecting Ken Walker III to eclipse 50 rushing yards and Geno Smith to surpass 2 touchdown passes on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDINNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's Locked On is the code on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s out there. Thanks for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The regular season is officially here. Week 1, Seahawks Broncos coming up on Sunday afternoon at Lumen Field. The 12s are going to be looking to rock the venue and make life tough for their former AFC West rivals as the Broncos come to town with third time or second time, actually, in the last couple of years the Broncos have opened the season at Lumen Field against the Seahawks. But, Rob, this is going to be a much different-looking team than the one that came to Lumen Field a few years ago when Russell Wilson had just been acquired in the trade with the Seahawks, and they had Nathaniel Hackett as the head coach for like 15 minutes. That was part of that 15 minutes was that opening loss to the Seahawks. And really, there's been a bunch of changes on both sides of the ball as Sean Payton and company, they try to turn over some new leaves here and get a younger team that is going to be ready to compete as quickly as possible in the AFC West.
Yeah, and obviously the biggest change is the fact that, as you said, there's a different head coach, it's a different quarterback. Sean Payton, his track record speaks for itself. I mean, he might be a Hall of Famer someday. He's a Super Bowl champion, and Bo Nix at the quarterback position, the rookie, rather than former Seahawk Russell Wilson. Obviously, you can't get much different than that. But it's some of the other differences that we've seen in the Denver Broncos from a year ago. No more all-pro free safety Justin Simmons. No more inside linebacker Josie Jewell. No more the former first-round wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. You're replacing them at the safety position with Brandon Jones, a free agent from the Miami Dolphins. Cody Barton is the free agent addition for the Broncos at the linebacker position. Of course, Seahawks fans are going to know Cody Barton very well. Barton, of course, played last year in Washington. And then at the wide receiver position, no more Jerry Jeudy, as I mentioned, but they brought in another player the Seahawks and Seahawks fans should be familiar with, Josh Reynolds, who had played with the LA Rams this past year with the Detroit Lions. And then Bo Nix's college teammate, Troy Franklin, the speedster from Oregon, is one of the rookies that I think might make a significant impact for Denver this season. It is a team that has had some significant turnover, but the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach, they're the same as last year. I don't think that you're going to see anything too dramatic in terms of changes. They're rookies, as I said. Bo Nix is their first round pick. What I do think that the folks in Denver are excited about, similar to the way that the Seahawks are excited about, say, the maturation of a Devin Witherspoon or a Boye Mafe. The Broncos have some legitimate young breakout candidates that I think that the Seahawks fans need to be kind of paying attention to, not the least of which is an edge rusher, Jonathan Cooper. He had 8.5 sacks a year ago, Corbin, his first year as a starter. He is entering his 4th year of his rookie deal. This is a 7th round pick who's looking to splash and make big money this offseason. So Jonathan Cooper is the edge rusher that I think the Seahawks fans need to be kind of paying attention to. And as I mentioned, breakout guys, the wide receiver Marvin Mims, previously at Oklahoma, I think he was a 2nd round pick. He's a speedster, and I really think that his fit with Bo Nix and Sean Payton's offense could make him the wide receiver that you have to worry about, perhaps even more than Josh Reynolds, even more than Troy Franklin. And one of my favorite receivers out there in the NFL anywhere is Courtland Sutton. I'm just fascinated to see how the Seahawks are going to match up against all of these guys. And if the rookie quarterback Bo Nix can do what nobody else has ever done among rookie quarterbacks, that's come into Seattle and get a victory.
What the Seahawks have got to be prepared for, Bo Nix in terms of play style. Yes, he and Russell Wilson both are dual threat QBs. That is really where the similarities end, though, because Russell Wilson, and we know this from the 10 years he played in Seattle, he is a scrambler. He is looking to improvise. He wants to extend plays. That's why he's taken so many sacks in his career. There's also a lot of good things that have happened with those extended plays. But Bo Nix is the polar opposite. Like, you will run designed runs with him. He can extend plays, but He wants to get the football out of his hands quickly. He wants to let his playmakers go to work. And that's the type of quarterback that Sean Payton wants. Drew Brees did that to a Hall of Fame clip for a long time in Sean Payton's offense. And I'm not saying Bo Nix is going to be a Hall of Famer, but the point is Sean Payton wanted a quarterback that was not going to go outside of the structure the way that Russell Wilson did. He wants a QB that is going to do what he's asked, get the football out quickly, and put stress on the defense. So the Seahawks are not going to be preparing for Russell Wilson. They've got to prepare for a much different type of passing attack, with the fact that you also have a running ability that Bo Nix brings to the table as more of a designed quarterback runner than what Russell Wilson did was basically sandlot football. And he was very good at it for a long time. But that is going to be the big difference here, is trying to get your defensive game plan set up for, hey, Bo Nix is wanting to get the ball out quickly. What can we do to neutralize this offense, limit the opportunities to create after the catch? And if you're able to do that, then it puts you in a pretty good position to win. But I look at Denver, and the thing that jumps out to me that I am impressed with, I know this has not been a playoff team, but the continuity they've got in the offensive line. Quinn Miners, who you and I were both big fans of coming out of Wisconsin Whitewater, we thought the Seahawks might have interest in drafting him. Seattle did meet with him at the Senior Bowl. They were interested, but Denver picked him on day 2 a few years ago, and he has turned into a Pro Bowl, borderline all-pro caliber player. They just locked him up on a multi-year deal and showed him the money for good reason. He has developed nicely the last couple of years. You've got Garrett Bowles. They've got a couple other young linemen that they're really excited about. So that's the one thing here. Is Denver going to be able to win at the line of scrimmage on offense? They've made some changes on defense, and yet you can make some arguments they're more athletic. And you got guys like Riley Moss that might be that next good corner to pair with Patrick Surtain on the other side. And Surtain's already a top 5 corner in this league. So Denver's got pieces. The question is going to be, how does Bo Nix play early? Are the Broncos going to have enough of a supporting cast for him? And is the defense going to be able to offset some of those losses, like letting go of Justin Simmons? Are they going to have that leadership void filled quickly? This is a team that's got some talent, though, and certainly the Seahawks can't take them lightly.
No, don't take them lightly at all. As you said, I mean, Denver's offensive line is a strength. Garrett Bowles at the left tackle position, Mike McGlinchey, former San Francisco 49ers, former first-round pick at the right tackle position. When he's healthy, he is a quality player as well. That's going to make it a lot easier for the rookie quarterback to be able to kind of deal with the noise, the expectations of his NFL debut. So I think that's an interesting matchup. The running game, Javonte Williams now is in year 2 after tearing up his knee a couple of years ago. He was running fast and hard. And that is something that Sean Payton, everybody talks about how he likes to throw the ball. You look back at those great New Orleans Saints teams, they ran the ball very effectively as well. So really think that's interesting. And I love the fact that you mentioned Patrick Surtain, because for my money, he is one of the elite players, regardless of position, in all of the NFL. And so I cannot wait to see him and DK Metcalf matched up one-on-one. I think that's going to be a fascinating battle as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We aren't quite to matchup Wednesday. We still got one other episode to get to before then, but I'm already chopping at the bit here. Let's get some matchups going for week 1. Anyway, as always, 12s, thank you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. You can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, it's going to be Tales of the Tape. We've looked at some of the newcomers for the Broncos who's left. Now we're going to start looking at some of the numbers and what to expect from the Broncos going into this week 1 matchup. You won't want to miss it as we dial things up for week 1. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thanks for listening. Go Hawks.